So hello and welcome to another edition of the Cloud Native Social Hour. I am, as always, your host, Nicholas Lane. This time on the Cloud Native Social Hour, we will be talking about disaster recovery. We were just talking right before starting recording that this time we decided to do DR instead of going over KubeCon, because this is the week of KubeCon, because most of us who didn't attend KubeCon didn't have enough time to watch any of the videos yet, so we couldn't do a good job doing a review of KubeCon. And those who attended aren't here, right? They're flying back or they're on vacation, which they should. So we're going to do a KubeCon review probably next time. This time we're going over, I think, a pretty interesting topic, which is disaster recovery. I have a HackMD for this, which I should tweet out so that if anyone who wants to add their name to the HackMD at the end, so that we get, it's called the section for gratuitous follow requests. So it's just a way to spread the love a little bit and allow us to, meet each other and see what everyone's talking about, because this is a social hour and we want to be social, right? Although it's not actually usually an hour, it's usually 2 hours, but whatever. So far, no one else has called me out on that. Only I'm the only one who's ever brought that up. So at the Cloud Native Social Hour, basically what we're doing is just we want to hang out and chat, and occasionally even chat about tech. But that's not really the main point. The main point is to have a more interactive experience with our Cloud Native community. So that's kind of it. We're just here to chill out. How's everyone's? Yeah, chill out. Copacetic, man.
Yeah. Totally.
So, as you see, for the first time ever, I'm here by myself. I'm all alone. No one wanted to be with me today. Now, everyone was super busy with their personal lives, because it is also
pre-holiday.
Holiday weekend. It's Memorial, right? Memorial Day?
Yeah.
Suddenly I'm like, oh crap. It was one of those things where I'm like, I'm confident that it's Memorial Day, and then I questioned myself immediately, and I was like, oh no. Is it? Yeah, so it's Memorial Day. It's a Friday before Memorial Day weekend, so as you can imagine, most people who aren't me and have a brain took today off for a longer weekend.
Or me.
Or you. I hope that you're actually like taking the day off and you just happen to show up because you wanted to do me a favor. So, yeah, anything interesting come out this week in the world of Cloud Native that anyone wants to talk about? Like I said, I haven't had a chance to watch any of the KubeCon videos, but I bet there's a lot of interesting stuff there. Carlisia, did you see anything?
No, I actually don't know. I have not been very actively following anything outside of my work.
Yeah, that's fair. Something that's kind of interesting for me and from a cloud native perspective, I'm having more of a chance to play with EKS right now. These people that I'm working with, they're trying out EKS, and it's something that I haven't had a chance to. So it's Amazon's managed Kubernetes service, and so far so good. Like, I've had a few problems, but that could be there. We're discovering that with the EKS container network interface, there are some different ways that you have to think about how you split up your subnets than you would with something with an overlay network like Flannel or NSX, or with something like BGP that comes from Calico. So in a Kubernetes perspective, like architecting a Kubernetes cluster in EKS, there's a bit more overhead that you need to think about. And so that's been kind of interesting for me to like play around with this.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the reason why it breaks up that way is that the EKS CNI, or just the Amazon CNI, assigns IP addresses per network interface, elastic network interface, so ENI. So each ENI gets like a chunk, like it can support this many IP addresses, like X number of IP addresses. Essentially, an ENI has like so many sub interfaces it can associate with, and each one gets an IP address. So each instance in Amazon gets like X number of ENIs, and each ENI has X number of IP addresses you can allocate to it. So like a M5 large instance in Amazon can support 3 ENIs and 10 IP addresses, giving you 30 IP addresses total for that node. Now, as you scale up the size of instances, so too do you get bigger and better ENIs, so you can support something more robust. So you can get up to like 244 IP addresses, which is basically comparable with what you get in a standard Calico deployment, which is around 254, I think, per node. So,
my own encounter with EKS was trying to set it up, because I don't have to really set up and manage clusters in production. I only need to set them up so I can develop Valero against it. And so my own encounter with EKS was trying to set it up, giving up, and using this really nifty tool called EKS Control.
Yeah.
It's basically a script that works with a bunch of default options that gives you a couple nodes. And it was beautiful. It just worked.
Yeah.
And
so,
things
shout out
never
to,
just work. So it just worked. It's perfect.
Yeah, that one was like, quote, TM just worked. So shout out to our friends at Weave Networks for coming up with EKS CTL. It is a dope tool and it does dope things, and they're dope people who also do dope things.
And my understanding is that you can bring up production-ready clusters with that.
Yeah, I believe that's the case. I know the people who I'm working with are they're leveraging more direct tooling. So I think they're using like either Terraform or something else. I can't recall exactly, but they're building out their own automation for it. I'm like, that's pretty dope too. And so, yeah, so I had a chance to play with EKS. I mean, talk about cloud native. It's in the cloud, right? It's built by one of the cloud companies. So, so far it's been interesting to play with. I'm still trying to figure out all the like bits and pieces to it, but it's been pretty neat. I think it's also cool to see how it's matured. Like when I tried it out when it first got announced, and EKS wasn't really in a ready state yet. I think it is far closer now to being like a production ready type thing. But that's neither here nor there. It's just been fun to play with. I think we actually might do a review of EKS versus AKS versus GKE, and maybe one of the other managed services as well, and trying to like have a bunch of people like chime in on what they think, one versus the other, pros and cons of using this system. Not necessarily to say like we're not trying to be like this is the one everyone should use or not or whatever. It's just I don't know what the difference between EKS and AKS is, and I think that might be fun to go into.
Yeah.
So, one thing that to continue the tradition from the last time we did this, so we did take a break 2 weeks ago because I was on vacation, and let me tell you, I needed to go on vacation. I needed to relax for a little bit. But last time I announced this thing, or not announced this, I started this thing where I recommend a song, and so this is Nick's Song Time Corner. This time I'm recommending, if you haven't checked it out, the Bleachers song, I Miss Those Days. It's a really so Bleachers is like a very poppy, alternative music kind of band. They're the kind of band that like they don't have a steady number of members in the band. That people jump in, people jump out, whatever their needs are. And so this song is really nostalgic, right? It's very much like I Miss Those Days. Like, yeah, like one of the lines is, yes, I was lost, but I miss those days, right? And so it's like, even though there were times in your life that were like bad, or that you were like, oh, what was I doing? Sometimes it's nice to like reflect on like maybe how simple things were, or, what it was like before. So it was like, it's a very happy sounding song with a very kind of bittersweet nostalgia mixed in. I really like it. So that's my recommendation for this week. Any song recs out there?
I'm sorry, you cannot say you recommended a song without playing it.
I don't know if I have the ability to play it.
Play it on your phone.
Let's see. Let me see if I can get this going on YouTube. I'll play just a clip because I mean we don't have to sit here for like 3 whole minutes listening to whatever garbage. Any songs that you recommend?
Oh man, I've been out of the music scene since I declared myself a grown-up.
I'm still in it. Here we go. Can you hear that?
Yeah. It's cute.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's fun. Like, there's one line. Actually, the next line it goes like, "And everything is changing. The storefront's rearranging. Yes, I was lost, but I miss those days." I totally get that feeling because I'm being from Seattle, and if you haven't been to Seattle recently, it's a totally different city than it used to be. Like back when I lived in downtown Seattle, it looks almost fundamentally different. And that was only like 6 years ago. Like this city has changed so much. And so yeah, there are times you miss those things, right?
That might be true for a lot of cities. I'm in San Diego now. And actually, maybe it's not true for San Diego because I've been here for 7 years and I don't see much of a difference. But Boston in the last 10 years, because I lived in Boston for a long time before coming here. There are pockets in Boston that changed so much. It's crazy. Just and by change, I'm saying upgrades.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like there's things like parts of like for Seattle, for instance, there's an area called South Lake Union, and before Amazon, Google, and Facebook changed their not headquarters for most of those, but Amazon moved its headquarters down in South Lake Union. It was nothing but warehouses. It was like large stretches of land where there was like nothing there essentially, and so they just like took down all these old buildings and put up these giant skyscrapers, and it just looks wild now. It's totally different.
Yeah. So, I mean, in a lot of cases in Boston, there were upgrades, but in some instances, there were also, just changes that's debatable if they were good or bad. For example, Harvard Square, there are a lot of big stores, and the little shops, they were driven away because the rent just skyrocketed.
Yeah.
So tiny bookstores, things like that. Little restaurants, they just had to go away, and sort of a bummer.
Yeah, there are always good and bad with these scenarios. Like gentrification has some positives, which is like people tend to, like in gentrified areas, people tend to feel safer, or there is like data to support safety. But at the same time, it kind of, to the people who live there and have lived there for a long time, it feels like these cities like lose some of their soul a little bit. All these little places that kind of made up the community are like pushed out in favor of like bigger and more like costly things. So, yep. So bleachers, I miss those days. Totally got us down this path, but super recommendation. I really like that. I like that band. Basically everything they've done, I've liked, which is actually kind of hard for me to say these days. Normally I don't jump in a new band. I'm like, oh, I love every single song. With bleachers, that is definitely the case.
I have to check it out.
Yeah, high recommendation. So this time we're talking about disaster recovery, which kind of dovetails nicely with our last topic, which was chaos engineering. So let's say you chaos yourself into a state where you can't work anymore. Your cluster is now functionally destroyed. How do you recover from that? So I'm sure most of us who have worked in the tech industry long enough are pretty familiar with the concept of disaster recovery, right? You have a disaster and you need to recover from it. That's basically it. So what does that look like, right? For most companies and for most like tech, disaster recovery is backups, snapshots, having your data somewhere so that if you need to, you can get it back, right? There are a lot of like mechanisms in place to handle this, but or like lots of different tools to handle this. But it was fundamentally different from a Kubernetes and from a container standpoint. How do you, like, what does it mean to do a disaster recovery for something like Kubernetes, right? You have, like I said, in the old days, in the infrastructure days, you had just data, right? You just needed anything that's on this file system, I need it backed up and put somewhere so I can get it back when I need to. But with the ephemeral nature of containers, for them coming up and coming down all the time, what does that even mean? What does that look like, right? So you don't need all the data on all of your containers, because that kind of breaks the microservice functionality altogether. So we needed a better solution. One of those solutions is something that we're going to be talking about today, and that's Project Velero, nay Heptio's Arc. And when I saw it the first time, Arc, I was just like, this is it. This is perfect. This is exactly what we need from a disaster recovery standpoint. Carlisia, do you mind talking to us a little bit about Valero?
Yep, of course not. I'd love to. And wanted to wheel back a little bit and just touch base a little bit on the fact that when we are talking about infrastructure and clusters, there are different types of backups that you want. Valero addresses one part of your backup needs, but you should be setting up, this is more like an infrastructure subject, but you should be setting up, in the land of cloud native and Kubernetes, you should be setting up your infrastructure in an automated way so that if things go wrong, you can quickly bring it up again. And so that's your actual clusters and your Kubernetes environment. Now, when it comes time to back things up, then one thing to look at is how much do you need to back up? Do you need to back up? Do you want to back up everything together, package everything together in the backup, which could be useful. But if you're doing that, it wouldn't be useful all the time, because sometimes you only need a partial restore. So this is one really cool thing about Valero, that because we don't access its etcd directly, we go through the Kubernetes API. Because unless you go through the Kubernetes API, you wouldn't have any way to do selective backups in restores. You have to back up etcd completely, and which would also not be possible if you were using a managed service. So if you were using a public cloud, you wouldn't have access to etcd, so you couldn't even do it. So Valero uses the Kubernetes API and allows you to do a full backup, which is recommended, but you can also do selective backup, just back up certain resources. And when you do ideally, you'll be doing full backups, and when you do a restore, you select if you want to do a full restore or a partial restore. And it's an open source tool by VMware. And what else? What else, Nick?
So some of the things that Valero does, and one of the reasons why I liked it so much is the fact that it didn't try to do anything particularly complicated, like try to access etcd to figure out the current state of things and then do a backup based on that. I'll talk about that in just a moment, doing that sort of backup. What Valero does, like I said, uses the API. So it is itself a pod or a deployment in Kubernetes that uses the Kubernetes service internally, much the way that anything should in a cloud-native perspective, like using Kubernetes objects. It does everything that, it just has like the specific APIs that it needs to refer to and captures those and then backs them up somewhere. One thing else that it does is persistent volume snapshots, which I think are really dope. People oftentimes, they're like, well, I have this data that I need backed up in Kubernetes as well. Does Valero do that? And the answer is yes, as long as your infrastructure supports it. Valero can't just magically make a snapshot for you, but it can tell, let's say you're using an S3 bucket, it can kick off an S3 snapshot. Or some other tool that I can't think of that functionality right now, it does a snapshot with something with vSphere. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or any of these other like the clouds that you run. I think that's really cool, right? I know that it's not something that works like 100% of the way that people expect necessarily. Like we see like things that mentions in the community and issues that pop up around that, but it does a good job. It does as good of a job as your underlying infrastructure, and that's kind of all you can ask for from a cloud native application. The infrastructure should support it. If it doesn't, sorry. So I think that's very valuable. Like it's not just these objects, and I think that differentiates it from what you were saying before, which is the automation, right? If it was just the objects, like these deployments, and they're all stateless things, who cares if you have a backup? Just create a new cluster and redeploy.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, a lot of users have more robust needs than that. And Valero and projects like Valero, which I will talk about in just a moment, do a good job to like help people out in this way. So besides Valero, I was looking up another tool called kubed. Carlisia, have you had a chance to look at this one?
I heard of it this week. I haven't looked at it.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at it too much myself. I haven't gotten like hands-on. Like I said, I was pretty busy this week. And I'm trying to think how I want to go with this. But basically, like I think the difference between Valero and kubed is a cluster operator. So it's using the operator framework that CoreOS just codified essentially. The operator framework, so in a way to like manage your objects and all the things inside of Kubernetes in a way that you can like back it up into a CRD and manage your backups that way. I think that's how it works. I, again, haven't had enough time to look at it, but that's another option for our friends in the cloud native community. I would say look at both of these tools. I, of course, particularly like Valero. But I would say if you're going down the path of using more operators, you're doing a more operator-heavy utilization, kubed is a good choice. Like, check it out. I don't know how much it differs from Valero from like how it works under the hood, because I need to look at it a little bit more. But I think the main difference is like Valero there's a CLI for Valero, right?
There is, yes. It runs as a server and it has a CLI as a client.
Okay, yeah, so it's like CLI versus operator model, I suppose.
I was just going to say,
ahead.
like, the PV that you talked about, Nick, there were a few folks yesterday that they were asking about backups and especially interested in PV. And I agree, that's one of the things that when I worked with my previous customer, that was what they absolutely like. When Valero did that backup and restore across two different clusters, like they were running 110 and then we moved to 112. And when they did it seamlessly, they were like blown away by how Valero did it. I think that's kind of like the use case that everybody looks at, and when it works as well as what Valero does, everybody's like pretty impressed.
Yeah, Valero works. It works well. I love it. And it's nice. The nice thing about it and tools like it, like kubed, is it gives you the safety in mind. Like it gives a peace of mind to know that if you're doing your backups regularly, if something goes down, if something happens, you can recover. That nowadays Kubernetes is in such a state that it is a more stable environment. It's less likely for your cluster to completely brick itself such that you can't use it anymore. But there are still scenarios where that could happen. For instance, we still don't have a particularly good story around certificate rotations. If your certificate CA for Kubernetes or for etcd expires, which it will after a year because that's the default in all Kubernetes installations unless it's been particularly set by a provider, which I'm pretty sure no one ever thinks about to do that. So all CAs in Kubernetes are a year old. So if you have a cluster that lives longer than a year, you could experience a catastrophic outage. So what do? Well, replacing the root CA of a cluster is a monumental task. It is far easier just to create a new cluster and then have a backup of your things and deploy to the new cluster. Bing, bang, bosh. Everyone, you didn't have to spend your weekend fixing your root CA problem. You just spin up a new cluster and there you go. Valero or kubed saved the day. A funny thing that came out with Valero and other disaster recovery tools along the way is it's not just disaster recovery. There's extra fringe functionality associated with it. A lot of times people use these things for migration or for duplication. Like let's say you're in an Amazon region and you want to stand up a new region, you just create a new cluster, but you want it to look similar to the old cluster, back up one, restore to the other, boom, you now have duplicate clusters. Or if you want to migrate regions, you take a backup here, destroy this cluster, create this cluster, spin it up. Hopefully you do this more in tandem, otherwise you just establish an outage and that would be bad. So this is a bad example, but whatever. I'm doing this like from the top of my head. Stand up a new cluster and then push all your objects to the cluster with your snapshots. And there you go, you've got a fresh migration. It's kind of an interesting use case that I don't think that we were thinking of initially when Project Arc was created, now Valero. But I'm happy to see that there's like extra functionality that people are happy with. So something I wanted to talk about, and part of the reason why we're talking about disaster recovery this week is that Project Velero just had a new release, and I think that's pretty awesome. It went 1.0, right?
Yes.
That's awesome. That's like, congratulations, that's so big.
Yeah,
Valero
it is a
getting
big
to
deal.
First stable release, it's like, yeah! So, Carlisia, do you mind telling us a little bit about what has changed from the previous release to 1.0?
Sure, Nick. I'm going to start with my favorite change, which was the install feature. Before, for us to set up a Valero on Kubernetes, we were applying CRDs, and now we don't have to do that. It was a little bit cumbersome because you had to, we had some examples, for example, but even the examples, we had to edit specific things like the name of the buckets. And now we just run an install command and we pass in some information. It's so much easier to use. I really love that we added that. We did a major overhaul of our plugin system. We cut down on a lot of the dependencies that we had before. So now if you are developing a plugin for snapshot support for a provider that we don't support, or for a provider for which there isn't a plugin yet, when you import the Vellaro plugin framework, you get a tiny set of dependencies. What else? There is better error reporting, stack trace reporting when you're using the plugin too. Before you couldn't see certain things that were happening on the server. So now when you're running your plugin, you can see it. Let me see. I'm looking through the list.
Yeah, there are a lot of changes in each release, and so it's like hard to know.
Another plugin improvement is that we are checking if a plugin with the same name already exists. So you know right away you can't add that name, you have to add a different name.
That's good.
Do you want me to go through the list? I'm still going through the, oh yes.
Oh, no, I was just curious what your favorites were. You don't have to go through the entire list if you don't want.
I was gonna.
Oh, okay. Please, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, my favorite was the install. I just love that. We also, so now when we do, when we ask a plugin to restore something, we have the option to say, well, restore this, but also give me the original backup, which I think is really cool. We did an upgrade to the Portworx plugin, which is a very specific use case. We made a little bit of improvements to the Restic plugin that we support. The Restic is, it makes backup of file systems. And that's useful when, so we support the 3 major service providers. So we have primitive snapshot support for Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud Platform. In addition to that, we have plugins that other providers have developed. We have an Oracle one in the works. We have one for DigitalOcean, Portworx. And if you are using one of those, I mean, if you are using a provider that's none of those, you can always use Restic and just do a file level backup. But our support for Restic is not quite like considered production ready, but we did bring it up to like a beta level. And we are going to be working a lot on that front to bring it up to, 1.0 worthy qualification. Just a lot of stability and usability improvements. And yeah, there is a blog post that goes into little details about some incompatibilities that if you're using previous versions, you have to make some changes to upgrade to 1.0. So it's all listed there in the blog.
Excellent. Do you mind linking the blog in the chat?
No.
Excellent. Also, is Restic a replacement for, I can't remember its name now, it starts with an M. It was the S3. There was a tool that we used, what's that?
Minio?
Minio, yeah.
No. So this is how the S3 comes into the picture with Velero. Mm-hmm. We don't back up S3. Little correction. What we do is we back up the Kubernetes resources and we back up the snapshots or file system using Restic. And we put all of that in a file and we dump it to an S3 bucket that you specify when you're setting up Valero. So that's the direction of the backup. We back things up and dump the backup in an S3 bucket. So an S3 bucket or anything that's S3 compatible. So if you're using Amazon, it'll be an S3 bucket. Anything, any of the the 2 other ones will also have an S3 compatible storage. Now, if you don't have access to anything that's S3 compatible, you can install Minio and point the backup to that Minio installation. And because Minio is S3 compatible and is also very easy to set up. So that's where your backup will go. And likewise, the restore will fetch from that bucket in order to restore to wherever you need to.
Okay, that makes sense. I had somehow in my head conflated Restic and Minio together. And I thought, I was like, oh, okay.
No, it's okay.
No.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I actually really like that, like the standard of being like, we need some measure or some thing to say like, this is the standard by which we're going to back up. And you happen to pick S3 because, well, I mean, it's pretty stable and it's a pretty well-defined API. And Minio kind of does the rest for you. And I think that's cool. I just really love it. I think Valero is a really cool tool and I've used it a lot myself. So congratulations again on getting to 1.0. That's huge. That's so huge. That's dope.
I wonder if anybody has any comments or questions so far.
Yep, I was going to say, if anyone wants to talk about like their disaster recovery story or like how they've used various tools, various tools.
It was really nice to hear the comments of Kaushik, I think.
Yeah.
No, I was sorry. I was just going to say that there are a lot of folks that were asking questions yesterday as well. And I think they've joined us newly for the social hour. So it'd be great to hear from them.
Yeah.
So if anyone out there has any questions, comments, or stories that you'd like to tell around disaster recovery, this is a great time.
So I have one question. Hi, this is Akshay.
Hi.
Hi. So so when we are backing up the PVs with respect to on AWS, so is there any limit on the size when we are snapshotting the PVs?
I think that any limit might be specified in AWS itself. Okay. I don't believe that there's a limit from Vellero's perspective, since all it does is kicks off a snapshot of that, like whatever that function is.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds right. Kubernetes has a limit as far as how big the objects can be when you store in Kubernetes. And as far as PVs go, I would say it's dependent on the service provider. As long as the service provider allows for it and your bucket size accommodates that too, we'll just do the work.
Okay, so with respect to Valero, there are no limitations.
No.
Let's say we have EBS volume with 2 TB, single volume. So I don't think so there is any limitations with respect to that.
Yeah, Valero is not going to give you. It doesn't stipulate any limitation. Now, the bigger your backup, the longer it will take. And I don't have it in my mind rule of thumb to tell you like this much would take this long.
Got it.
But we are looking to improve, and we don't see many issues coming through saying Valero is slow.
Okay.
I have never even seen it, but we have it on our list to make the backups concurrent. So it's gonna definitely improve if you're thinking like you have bigger than normal backup needs. Okay.
And one other question is, so let's say there is a CNI change with respect to cluster which we backed up, and if you want to back up the data with a new network configuration, so is there any limitation with respect to that? Let's say we are using Kubernetes networking in one of the cluster, and we want to back it up to AWS CNI.
I can't think of a reason why the network would cause that issue. It should be independent. So like Valero, it backs up the objects. So things like pods, deployments, daemon sets, all these things. So the API objects themselves get backed up, and then any data is backed up as well and stored somewhere, either via snapshot and all these things. It should be network independent.
Okay.
If you see a problem though, please raise an issue in Valero.
Sure. Yeah, we'll try that. Yeah, thanks.
Yep. That's an interesting question though. That was something I was like, well, there might actually be something, but I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of any reason why that would be the case. But.
Yeah, I can't either, but I'll have to double check with people who know better.
Yeah, network and network changes are always kind of a funny thing. So good luck with that. Good luck with your CNI migration. Remember to allocate more IP addresses than you expect to use when using AWS CNI, EKS CNI, just because it has the cooling down period, right? So you have your pool of active IPs and a pool of cooling down IPs. Hopefully you have more active IPs that this doesn't really matter, but just keep that in mind.
Okay, sure.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep. Anybody else? Any disaster recovery stories? Any disastrous stories that maybe Valero could have helped you with, or KubeD could help you with?
Just a question on the backup itself, Pawan here. Are the backups more snapshot based or incremental?
That's going to depend on the service provider. So Valero interfaces with the service provider API. And basically, we just say, give me a snapshot, and how that's going to be done on their side, we don't get to specify. So you have to read through their documentation and see how they do it.
So what would I gain using Vellaro versus directly going through the service provider's backup configuration?
One thing, you have all your backups in the same place. You're using one tool for both the etcd and the snapshots. But I don't know, I can think of anything else. Can you, Nick?
Not particularly. Like, so if this was a case where you only really cared about backing up that one tool, it might make more sense just to use that snapshot function. But I think that there is some value to having, like, there's context associated with data, and so having that context with the data that you're backing up at the same time, I think there is some value there, but that is really up to the end user. A lot of these questions do come out of like, well, it depends on this scenario, right?
Yeah, it depends on your use case, definitely. If you don't have a use case, if all your use case is, I just need backup of my snapshot, yeah, definitely you can use the service provider. But other things I can think too is, let's say you want to back up a snapshot from one provider to another provider, you can use Restic to do that pretty well. And in the future, we might have native support for that. Don't know, but it's something we talk about.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question.
Yeah, great question.
That's actually something, I don't know this actually. So Carlisia, please inform me. Does Valero do etcd backups as well? Because the last time I really used it hardcore, it didn't do etcd at the same time.
What do you mean by etcd backups?
So does it do access the etcd API and pull the information out of it and like store it somewhere? Or is it more just like whatever's in the API, whatever comes from the Kube API?
Okay, so what Valero backs up all the Kubernetes objects.
Okay.
That's the scope.
Yep.
So everything that you can do a kube control get, anything that you can do a get for, the Valero tool backs up.
Okay.
I'm
That's
not
what
even,
I thought.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that because I remembered thinking about it a while back and I hadn't gone back and revisited it. I haven't had a need to. So one thing that I want to, like a disaster recovery scenario that I do want to talk about when it comes to things like Kubernetes is something like an etcd backup. So etcd being the brain of your Kubernetes cluster, it's not a bad idea to occasionally back it up. And so the etcd CTL tool or the etcd ADM tool, which is becoming more and more like stable, these things can help facilitate backing up your etcd cluster. I wanted to do a demo around backing up etcd and then restoring it, but I didn't have time. So I'm sorry. Maybe I'll do a blog post about it, as if there aren't already like a million blog posts around doing an etcd backup. So basically, like the way that this functions is you go into your etcd cluster either from a management service or just like SSHing into a node, issuing an etcd CTL backup command, and then taking that data and storing it somewhere, like S3 somewhere, so that, and doing this on a regular basis, either through automation or however you want to do it, so that if there's a problem with your etcd, if you need to do a big cluster migration and you want to make sure that all of that data comes with you, you can do a restore. There is a caveat though. etcd does not handle restores very well. That data is actually kind of like etcd, as powerful as etcd is and useful as etcd is, it can also be incredibly fragile. And so doing a full backup and restore, there are some limitations to it. And in the past, I will say like in the last year, or a year plus time, I tried to do an etcd backup and restore, and it just failed miserably. And I'm not entirely certain why. So this is something that in the Kubernetes architect team that we like to make sure people are doing is regular practice of your backups and restores. And this is something that Valero can help with, but also your own tooling should be able to help you with as well. Taking a backup of things that are valuable to you and then restoring them somewhere, or either in the same cluster or somewhere else, so that you are confident when the time comes to do the restore that it will succeed. These tools are great and they will help you, but you need to practice using them as well. If you don't, when it comes time to actually recover from disaster, it could be another disaster.
Now, can you do a full etcd backup on a private cloud, on a public cloud? I thought you couldn't do that.
Well, so something like a managed service like EKS, no, because the control plane is hidden from you. Mm-hmm. But for something like your own, like if you're using a public cloud and you have your own etcd cluster, sure,
okay. Yeah, all right.
It's any other instance, right? But that is one of the things that EKS or AKS or GKE or whatever it is that Oracle's doing, or IBM's doing. Your control plane, I believe, for most of these, I know it is for Amazon, is totally hidden from you. So they should be the ones who are managing any kind of disaster recovery in that scenario. And hopefully they're also practicing their disaster recovery practices. I'm hoping, because, hey, you're paying them, right? So anybody else? Any more questions around disaster recovery, stories, comments? Okay, so let's jump into this a little bit early than we normally would, but let's jump into demos. Carlisia, do you mind giving us a demo of some of the newer things in Valero and also just Valero itself?
Sure.
Awesome, thank you.
Hang on to your seats.
I'm not sitting down.
You should sit down right now.
Okay.
Good time for you to go and sit down.
Yeah.
All right, let me share things here. Okay, I have just a few slides to go through. Basically, what Valero is, we talked a bunch already. Not gonna spend a lot of time. You can do. I'm just going to scan and see things that maybe we didn't talk about. So relevant here is you can do full and selective backup and restore because we use the Kubernetes API. You can back up a cluster and duplicate that cluster into another cluster, which is very handy if you want to duplicate environments. For example, you have a dev environment, a test environment, production environment. You can back up from the production enroll into those other environments. And it's very handy. It runs as a server in a Kubernetes pod, specifically in the deployment, and it has a CLI as a client. It has a scheduling feature, super handy. The selective backup and restore works with namespaces. Like I just said, can have different environments. For example, if you delineate the environments by namespaces, you can just say, back this namespace into another cluster. Resources, so you can specify the resources you want to back up, or you can use label selectors. You can label things, pods, and say, everything with this label gets restored. So like I said, we have snapshot primitives for the big three, and people can have additional snapshot storage support with our plugin system. We have a separate repo that's called Valero plugin-examples, and that has an example of how to do that. This is for people like someone from DigitalOcean wants to have a snapshot plugin that Valero works with, they would do that. And if you don't have anything that fits those two, you can always use Restic. But we recommend that you only use Restic if you don't have a plugin or you're not using one of those three cloud providers. We have pre and post hooks for customization, pre-backup, post-backup, pre-restore, post-restore. You can, for example, annotate things or do other things that you think you might need to do. Scheduling is repeated there. And it's really cool, I think, that we also have logging at the backup level, so you can run logs for each individual backup and see what's going on at that level. This is a general workflow for Valero. So on the left, you have cluster A. On the right, you have cluster B. And we are talking about within the same service provider. So basically on the left, you're saying backup everything, create a backup called my backup, only for the namespace called as an example, and include my snapshots, my volumes. So the blue rectangle is the Kubernetes. The orange is Valero. So Valero, the Kubernetes API will pull those objects from the Valero, from the Kubernetes side of things, and then we will dump that in the format of a backup into an S3 bucket, anything that's S3 compatible. And when you need to do a restore, you say create a restore from backup, my backup, which is the same name as we just did. And basically, we're going to just go the other way around, pull from the S3 buckets and shove it into your Kubernetes cluster. Make sense? Any question?
No, it makes perfect sense to me.
All right, so I'm going to run a rough demo. Just wanted to start with this part because I use it all the time. If you're playing with Valero, just wanted to point out that this is how you wipe out Valero from your cluster. And so if you're playing, it's very handy if you're playing with it. Just wipe everything, do it again. If something didn't work, do it again. Figure out what you did wrong, fix it. And this is in our documentation on Valero.ai, Valero.io website. So I actually just ran this. I have an AWS. I have actually an EKS cluster running.
Oh, snap.
Yeah, one that I set up with
EKS CTL?
EKS CTL, yeah.
Excellent.
So I'm going to share my terminal.
By the way, I'm not the person who pronounces CTL as cuddle. I can't stand it.
I'm too safe for that. All right, I'm going to share my terminal here. I think I'm sure, yeah. Sure, I'm going to make this bigger. Okay. Can you all see, Nick, can you see my screen well?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Although I've got a pretty big screen that I'm looking at. If somebody else online can't see, please let us know.
Yeah, somebody say something because I can make this bigger, smaller.
Looks
Okay.
good.
Oh, say it again, I'm sorry.
Looks good to me.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, nice fish config.
Thank you.
I like fish.
All right, so I'm on the master branch here and I'm gonna copy and paste a bunch of controls. Hold on. Okay, so first, I have a cluster up and running, which is a prereq to have Velero running, just to make sure. And now I'm going to install Velero, and I switched to Bash because the way the commands are here, Bash friendly and not fish friendly. So the first thing that I'm doing here, so this is all that you need to do to install it. It's pretty cool. So you have, oh, I'm sorry. You have to have your buckets set up too. And we have the instructions to do that on our website. So basically there is a section that says install Velero, and another section in separate sections that says what you have to do in specific for either AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud Platform. And as far as those providers go, it doesn't matter if you're doing the managed service or the full Kubernetes, like your own Kubernetes running on the service providers. It makes no, as far as Valero goes, it makes absolutely no difference. So imagine you have your cluster up, you set up your buckets, you have the right policy, you have to add a Valero RBAC thing, so you have Valero has access to that bucket. It's all on our documentation. So I already have that. So when I set up the bucket, I gave it a name, and it's apparently it's C-AWS Valero bucket. This is actually what I'm using for development. Nothing special for demo, so just bear with me. So I'm going to set up that variable. I know, sorry. So I'm going to just to make it easier for me, set up the couple variables for buckets and region, and then I'm going to copy the install command. So I want to go over this a little bit. So we are the first line, Valero install. Second line, we specifying which provider we are using. Then the buckets variable here that I just specified up there. The backup location config. This is just the default, and it's called US East 2. That's the region for my things. And the snapshot location config, also same region. And I have a credential file here. That's another thing that I need. So when I create my cluster, I get credentials to access that cluster. And the way the Valero install works is that you have to pass the name of the file to this flag. And I'm saying here, use restic, because I'm going to use restic, because why not? Install, what?
You got bit by the demo gods.
Oh, like in the first 5 seconds? Couldn't it have taken a bit longer?
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I swear I use this all the time. This makes no sense. Okay, let me just for kicks, I'm gonna do is I'm going to install the tip of Valero.
Okay.
I don't see the install here on the list.
Yeah, me neither. I saw that as well. Is it server?
No, it's install.
Okay.
It's just Valero install.
Okay. No, don't worry. I have many of my own demos. I'm like, oh, hey, this totally just worked like 5 minutes ago. What the hell?
I swear, it's like I use this all the time.
Yeah, I bet it's a versioning thing. So this is kind of a funny, like while we're doing this, I'll kind of riff a little bit. Something that if you are installing new versions of Kubernetes or you're migrating, like some of our friends have talked about already, if you're migrating Kubernetes, particularly from one version to another, remember to update your kubectl file, your client as well. There are so many times where I've gotten bitten by some stupid change to the API from like old version of, like I'm using an old version of kubectl client and I'm trying to deploy something, and it keeps giving me this like wacky error, and I'm like, this should work. It just worked yesterday. Like, what's going on? I realized that I hadn't changed my path to point to the new kubectl version because I run a like pretty poor versioning control on my local laptop because I'm kind of lazy. But I run into problems like this, such as I can't make sure that I have kubectl versions set properly. So, pro tip, make sure that you're running your client at the same or higher version, or actually same version as the Kubernetes server you're trying to connect to.
All right, so now what I'm doing is creating my credentials file. I have the content, I just didn't have the file right here. So
make sure you don't paste your like private key or anything. Oh, all right.
Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna have to remember that timestamp for something to blur out the screen for that.
Don't worry, that cluster will go down pretty soon.
Oh, okay. If it doesn't matter, then whatever.
All right, do this again. Okay, so going to bash, because when I switch to fish, I lose those variables. This was fun the first time around. Are you serious?
At least this one.
Credential.
Oh, credential instead of credentials.
Oh my Lord. Somehow I thought that was easier than changing the things.
I do that all the time.
Name. Oh my gosh, yay.
There we go.
All right. My work here is done. Nice to see you.
I like the little, yeah, the ship emoji or whatever.
Isn't it cool? Nolan did that. Nolan did that. He did a great job.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. So how do I even know this worked? Because with Kubernetes, we do things. Then it's no.
Yeah.
Success, but things are happening on the background.
Yeah, you declared that you want these things to exist, but hey, let's make sure that they actually exist.
Yeah.
Although it's good, like attempting to create, that's nice.
So hold on. Okay, so actually, it says right here, I was looking for the command. So use kube control, logs deployment Valero and Valero, because this gets deployed to a namespace named Valero.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to check the status.
Oh, storage location.
I don't think that's going to work, Nick.
Backup store located default is invalid. RPC error code equals unknown description. Signature does not match. I don't know what that means.
It means let me look at my install.
Backup store for location default is invalid.
It's an access issue. I'm going to. I have a visual tool here. I'm going to take it to see.
Okay.
If I see what this is.
All right. You go ahead and do that, and I'll chat.
Yes.
For a little bit. So, I'm trying to think, like, what are... So something that's kind of nice about there being a community around disaster recovery in Kubernetes, and I see it growing, is that there isn't just like the one tool, as we said. It's the fact that there are tools at all. I remember when I first started using Kubernetes back on like OpenShift 3.0 and 3.1, there was nothing. It was a barren wasteland. At the time when we needed some kind of disaster recovery at all, we had nothing. And so I'm really happy to see that this is something that people need and are using, and the community is growing more and more. This is awesome. Like, so out there on the phone, is there anyone using a non-Amazon cloud provider? Like, are you using like Azure or GKE? And have you used Valero as well as part of that? I'm going to guess, I'm going to take silence as a no. That's something that I haven't had a chance myself to try out. And I do want to see how the different disaster recovery tools are facilitated by something like Valero. Because hopefully what we should see is that they're basically, it doesn't matter, right? They're idempotent, not idempotent, really, that's not how that word works. But they're independent of each other, but Valero should function for all of them the same. But it's something that I haven't tried out, and I actually been meaning to kind of get a good idea. Part of the reason why I'm asking is, as much as I enjoy using AWS, gosh, its access rules can be so confusing sometimes and so just outrageous.
So I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Brandon Burton. I work on the Wavefront operations team with Kai and Emerzy.
Oh, hey, welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, kind of. We've been looking at Valero in part because we've got some EKS 110, right? We want to move ahead, but the default upgrade is like, you're swapping out core DNS and some of those things, kubedns for core DNS. And it seems a little hairy. Seems like this is a better path. But another thing we're looking at, sort of in tandem, because we're also moving a few things off of some older 1.8 COPS clusters. And for that move, we're actually doing more of a manual migration because we want to switch to using Customize for managing some of the per environment differences. Whereas up till now, we'd been managing stuff by having a folder per cluster and then sort of duplicate but slightly different Kubernetes YAML manifests in each folder. So of course that does mean, right, that some of what ends up as the actual resources inside the Kubernetes cluster look a little different from what you'd have on the file system or what you get back from the API. So I'm sort of curious how something like that, where someone's using Customize or maybe JSON or some other templating kind of emerging tool, how does that hook in with the restore process of the Valero might do?
So that's interesting. So if I understand the use case, so if you're using something like a templating tool like JSON or a KSONNET, and you want to do a backup and restore from one region to another, right? And you have specific, I'm assuming you have specific variables or something set to define the labels in one region or the other, right?
Yeah, or a good example is the ARN of an SSL certificate in ACM for an ELB, right? Because you have different accounts, different regions. So yeah, so in the case of Customize, it kind of have this idea of overlays. And so you've got sort of your base YAML and then other fragments of YAML, and then it merges them together and spits that out, and then you pipe that into kubectl apply, and it sends it up. So there is sort of a workflow, right, where you have Git repo as a source of truth for your stuff, for your manifests and your resources, but what's on what's in the Git repo is not actually what gets posted to Kubernetes.
Yeah. So I think this is a case where if you're doing something statelessly, it might make more sense to use the tool itself to redeploy. Because I don't believe that there is any mutation that Valero does to handle scenarios like this. It just takes whatever's in the API and backs that up and then redeploys. Minus like things like the UID or specific like UID, time, creation time, all these things that are created by the API server itself, or actually, I guess, the scheduler, controller, manager. No, that'd be the API server. Never mind. All these things that are created by the API server, those fields, I think, get stripped out, but everything else is the same, and there's no mutation that occurs. That is an interesting use case, though. That might be something to come back and talk to the Valero team at large with.
I think.
Yeah.
I think I know what it is, so I'm trying to fix it.
Okay. Actually, so that reminds me of something. Brandon, and you might be someone who might talk about this a little bit more, but there isn't just backup and recovery that is associated with disaster recovery. There's also monitoring. It's kind of something we talked about last time on the chaos engineering episode, but monitoring your infrastructure is vital to know when something is wrong and to know when you need to restore something, because you could be in a case where you don't know that your machines are, or your cluster's down. Like your control plane could be down, but the pods are running and you wouldn't maybe necessarily know about it unless you were observing your cluster and alerting on it. Brandon, do you want to talk about some scenarios where monitoring has assisted the disaster recovery workflow? I don't mean to put you on the spot either. I'm just kind of, you're on the Wavefront team. I thought maybe you might have some scenarios.
That's actually an interesting question. Our infrastructure itself is mostly still like instance-based. Our Kubernetes usage is more of sort of infrastructure like, Artifactory or like other services that are sort of to the side of Wavefront itself, if you will.
Okay.
So, I mean, in our case, like in terms of monitoring, it's more about like, like being able to get like node state and things like that have helped. In our same group on the Symfony side, I know they've done some stuff with detecting certain issues like not ready, and I don't know, maybe Akshay can talk about that a little bit. He's a little more familiar with some of that.
Awesome. All right. Well, didn't mean to put you on the spot. I was just reaching out. So this looks much better, Carlisia.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. Saved it.
I think I've done 1 or 2 demos in my life, but so long ago.
Yeah. If you go your entire life in tech doing demos and they don't fail at least once or twice, were you ever actually really doing demos?
Exactly. I don't know what you were talking about, but I neglected to mention that we also have endpoints to work with Prometheus.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get metrics for what's happening with your
backups. That's cool. I remember hearing about that. That's right. I haven't had a chance to play with that. I was asking about the scenario how monitoring can assist disaster detection and the recovery functionality. Mm. So, please,
okay. So as per the instructions here, I am fetching the log just for the Valero deployment in the Valero namespace, and all looks well. Mm-hmm. And one thing that's interesting here is that, what is it? Hold on. Okay, here, the very last line. Got backups from backup stores, backup count 22. How's that possible? Didn't I just boot up Valero? The thing is, when you delete Valero, Valero doesn't delete your backups, which is a good thing. And so since I'm booting up Valero in the same cluster I was using, that's running against the same bucket I was using before, it recognized that I have 22 backups in that bucket. And obviously, I can still restore from any of those.
So how does Valero recognize a Valero backup?
So Valero has a controller that continuously checks for backups, for the backups that we have in the buckets.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you manually go there and delete, let's say you have one backup, you delete that backup, Valero will check for that backup and garbage collected from the Valero system if that backup no longer exists.
Oh, okay.
If you delete it, but why would you do that?
Yeah.
So the main way to answer that question is that we are continuously monitoring the buckets for backups. And we are caching some stuff too, so certain things won't take as long.
Cool.
So from here, so we have Valero up and running we against the buckets that had to be set up. So now what we're going to do is we're going to deploy Nginx app, and that's going to run on the nodes. And basically, then we're going to use Restic to back that up. So I think now I can turn back to Fish. And so basically, I'm going to run this command here. It's kube control apply. And that is, I'm at the root of the Valero project. So we have an examples folder with different things in there. So I'm just going to run that against an existing example. And that's valid. Okay, so let me see here. Oh, it's because, what name did I use? So, all right, so the name for this is Nginx logs. Why is it not working?
The storage class CRD may have changed since the version.
Okay, yeah.
So this is going back to, remember, always keep track of the version changes when it's going from one version to another. But for the most part, things are stable, but in the case of things like CRDs, there can be changes that you're not aware of, so you could get it in a situation such as this.
So what should I be looking for?
That's actually hard to, it depends. For the answer, my honest answer, like if I'm being like a tech guru, the actual answer is like, be aware of the CRDs that you follow and then watch to see if there's any changes. The actual answer is wait until you get bitten like this and then figure out why and then make the appropriate changes. Because this is, I mean, honestly, how are you going to know, like you would have to have all of the resources in the world, like the ability to concentrate like a madman to follow every change to every CRD. And a lot of times there's no changes, so it's kind of boring.
I think I might, I know why. I know why.
I could be way wrong then. Maybe it's not actually.
It's because it already exists.
Oh, well then I'm just wrong.
It's my theory. So I have, okay, so here was, sorry, gets, this work? Yeah. So delete. I think once I delete this, it will work. Thank you. Yeah, because there was nothing wrong with that name. It was complaining about the name.
Yeah.
The first reason that comes to my mind is that name already exists. And when I looked at the...
Yeah, so you're right. Because the spec forbidden is immutable. I saw the DNS 1123 and I'm like, oh, maybe they changed the spec for the CRD since you became aware of it. I might be wrong though.
I don't know why this is not returning. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not what I want.
I love Control R to reverse search your history for a command, but I do that all the time. Where I'm like, I vim something and then I kubectl it, and I'm like, Control R, the name of the thing, and then it takes me to Vim, and I'm like, what am I doing again? Why am I here?
So I'm gonna rant with myself because this is like, whenever people ask me for tips on how to be a programmer, the first thing I say is learn to read the logs. And I started reading this, name is invalid, but I stopped, but it's right, the problem is right. Your storage class name. Do you see?
Oh my gosh, wow.
Yeah, it's hard-coded.
I skipped right past that, yeah.
Well, that one is on me. So basically,
there it is,
yeah, that you can specify if you have to, but if you leave it blank, it will also work. But you definitely cannot leave it like that. That
right,
is not going to work.
That's good to know.
Voila. Now we go.
Hey, qué bueno.
Qué bueno, muy bien, muy bien. Next step. So we are going to annotate.
Yeah, that was a much simpler solution than my, hey, keep track of your CRDs because they may change.
Yeah.
Or a better tip, as you say, actually read the logs, read the error that you received.
That's the third step. Like you said, well, the other way to do it is to just wait until it bites you. But you can't stop there. You have to actually read the log.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm making an annotation to that part. Is that what I'm doing here, Nick?
Annotate pod, nginx deployment, deep. Is that the name of that deployment?
Oh, no, it's not.
Yeah, I thought you might have been copy and pasting.
I was copy and pasting, but oops.
Okay.
Okay, so that is the name of my part. I'm gonna edit I'm using the text file here that you all cannot see.
Yeah, I mean, everyone who runs a demo has a text file of commands to run.
Yeah, it would have been better if I was showing it to you.
Nah, that's fine. That's for you. That's speaker's notes.
No, I'm not apologizing for it. I'm just explaining that when I take a little while to come back to the term, that's what I'm doing. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I got it. Okay. Annotated. Yoo-hoo.
Hey.
One victory at a time. Now we're going to create a backup. I'm just going to go copy and paste all the way. So I'm going to change the name of this backup because it might already exist. So I just incremented it by 1. Ah, it already exists.
Oh, probably because you did no, I don't know.
Yeah, I changed it to backup A1. Now we are going to do, hold on. We're going to find out what happened to this backup.
Completed.
Okay, completed. And so we see here that persistent volumes non-included because we didn't use the service provider PV. We used Restic instead. So, I mean, you can use both, but I only used Restic. So that is completed. And if I do that, no. I will, if I do that, I will see, oh no, how do I see my Restic deployment? Oh, the deployment, yeah. Yeah, so there it is.
Nice.
Nice. Now, so one thing that I can do is, so I use the describe commands. I can do Valero backup logs and give the name of my backup. I think this is a really cool feature because you don't have to go through the whole entire Valero log to see just what's relevant for that one backup.
Yeah, that is handy. I actually didn't know that existed.
And so I think that's going to be it. I didn't set up anything to make a restore.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Basically, you would create a new restore and you specify the from flag from backup and give the name of this backup, and you could restore it into another namespace. Maybe I can do that. Hold on.
Okay.
So,
yeah, so on the fly.
I am in this namespace. How do I check my namespace? Q.
No, actually.
I have a tool, but I never remember. I have all these visuals, like I know I'm in what namespace I am by looking at this, and I have a thing on my visual code that I also use.
So this is something that I never do, which is usually enter into namespaces. I usually just do like a kubectl-n. So I guess I'm always in the default namespace. So this is one where I don't know, actually. That's interesting.
So one thing that's interesting too is you can do Valero backup create or Valero create backup. So
oh, cool. You don't care what order the flags are in?
No. So I'm going to do Valero restore creates from backup. See the name of my backup.
nginx-backup A1.
Yeah. Oh, let me look up what I need to put next.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Let's see if that's going to work. I don't know what this is going to do. So let's look at the logs. I think you create. I'm wondering in what namespace this was created. I will check. Hold on. Just want to check the logs first.
Okay.
Oh, I need this. I promise I type a bit faster than this. Not much faster, just a bit faster. Oh.
Just your keyboard isn't clacky enough, honestly. That's really it. That's the thing that's slowing you down.
It looks okay to me. Restore completed. Yeah. See?
Mm-hmm.
Now, how would I check? Let me see. Whether restore went. That's what I want to know. Does anybody, is there something else that people want to know? My curiosity is where did it go?
So I always do k get pods --l namespaces. And then you can see like, oh, okay, these pods now exist here.
Okay, get pods, all namespaces.
Yep, there you go. That's all namespace.
I'm sure you went into the Valero namespace.
Looks like it. Or maybe.
I just saw the name of it. I mean, I just used the name.
Yeah.
The name of the restore is this NGX backup A1 and 20190 ends with 031.
Get all your services as well. Do a get SVC.
All namespaces?
Yeah. That's interesting. Did it restore into a different cluster?
No, because I don't have a different cluster. I only have this one.
You don't have a kind cluster running?
No.
Okay.
Oh, so it went into the Valero namespace, and I know that because one, I didn't specify, Valero is the default. I didn't specify a different namespace. And I can see here on my Visual Studio tool.
Oh, that's where it would go.
So yeah, so let me see. Get, how about this? Valero get restores. There it is.
Yeah, 3 warnings, 0 errors created.
And we can do this, I think. No.
Table JSON and YAML. Okay, that's the default, I guess.
Yeah. Not YAMLs. Well, I don't know. I'm trying to see,
yeah, so
like, trying to show how to find out where things go if you don't specify anything. But see, here you can see namespace Valero.
So that's probably where it ends up.
Yeah, no, I knew that's where it went, but I was like, how do I show this?
Okay, cool. All right, anything else from a demo perspective?
No, unless somebody wants to see anything specific. I mean, Valero is very simple to use. As you can see, it's nothing to it from the user standpoints. But it can get more complicated once you're dealing with PVs and you start wanting to select different things, combine different things.
Awesome.
How does scheduling work?
Scheduling works like same way. So let's see. You do a Valero create schedule. And because I don't know, I'm going to see what's available. So Valero create schedule name. Do you see up here?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, and then you have flags, and these are the flags. Just like a backup or like a restore or like a backup, you have pretty much the same flags. And the thing here that's going to be relevant is this Can you see my highlights?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, cool. So this is the thing that's going to be relevant for the schedule. That's unique. You're going to pass a cron expression that will specify how often the schedule will run for.
Okay.
I did not know that that was in cron format, so that's actually good. That's good to know. Also, cron format is confusing.
Yeah, the @every is a nice addition.
Yeah, I think I have never touched the code that has to do with the scheduling, but I think it's because that's how Kubernetes does it.
Yeah, it probably follows the cron job format.
The TTL feature is nice too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you don't keep backups hanging around for forever. Like if I had a 1.5 cluster backup today, why would I care about it? Awesome. Any other questions around Valero or anything else you'd like to see? All right, thank you so much for running through that demo, Carlisia. That was great. Like I haven't used Valero in a while, and it was nice to see like the way that it's changed.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's great.
Yeah, you did a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
With that, we don't really have too much else on the docket. I wasn't able to get another demo together, either myself or anybody else. So if there's anything that anyone wants to talk about, this is kind of like an open forum now.
Yeah.
Or if you want to blast off like this, you could have blasted off at any time. There's nothing keeping you here.
Yeah, so as far as Valero, I mean, please ask us questions now, but if you think of something in the future, there is a Valero channel on the Kubernetes Slack. You can ask questions there too.
How active is that channel actually? I haven't been in a while. It's
up and down. Sometimes we have weeks, like a couple inquiries, and sometimes we have weeks where it's like, it's up and down.
All right, cool. I'm glad to see that's still in use.
Yeah, oh, it is definitely in use. Every day we have a couple things.
Cool.
At least.
At least. All right. Yeah, I need to get back and watch the KubeCon videos. There's a couple that I'm very excited to see.
Yeah.
Amy, our friends Amy Codes and Aaron apparently put on a good show, and I want to watch that. Olive did a lightning talk about our friend and colleague Olive did a lightning talk on what to do to prep for your CKA exam. So I highly recommend checking that out. She's great. And
yeah, I checked it out. It's awesome.
Is it? I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less.
I mean, it's useful, it's informative. And she talks about some things that I haven't, because I have read about like study notes from people, but she has a couple different things.
Yeah, that's awesome. So super recommend that. Obviously, like Craig Tracy and Josh Rasso's talk, I need to get back and watch that. You know, it's too bad that no one, I'm stealing Dan's joke, like too bad no one showed up at totally packed room. This seemed like a really exciting KubeCon. Everyone seemed like they were just like really energized this time.
You know what I'm energized for?
What's that?
And I don't even know if I'm going to go, but the next one is in San Diego, which is where I am.
Yeah, the next United States one is San Diego. It's like right around the corner.
So people are asking questions about where the recording is going to be. So there is a VMware there's a YouTube channel called VMware Cloud Native. Because I think VMware has other channels too, but this one is VMware Cloud Native. And this video is going to be under the open source playlist. Of course, you can search it in many different ways, but there is also a playlist called open source.
Awesome. And thank you for managing the chat. I can't do it from here. I'm not on it. I'm not on the chat. I'm sorry. So yeah, everything gets posted to the YouTube channel. I'm going to talk to him about maybe we can set up our own playlist. I think that'd be good.
There we go. Thank you. Brandon asked and provided the link. I wasn't even thinking of getting the link. Thank
Awesome,
you.
thank you.
And thanks, Kai, for suggesting the kube config creds. So I didn't even mention what my problem was because Nick was talking and I was following through.
Well, when
so
am I
my
not?
when is Nick not talking? Exactly. So my problem was that when I pasted an additional return carriage in the file that screwed it up. So I opened it again because I've been using this. There should be no problem. So I opened it up again, saw the extra character, removed it. It's fine.
Awesome, good catch. Do you have one of those tools that highlights like erroneous new lines or anything like that?
It's because I had it pasted in my note thing. And when I pasted in this notepad thing that I use, it added this return carriage. So when I copied, I pasted it together. It's not like a super plain text thing. You know,
Man, that's something Oh, go ahead.
No, it's useful, but in general, but when you paste in code and commands, bites you once in a while.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's one of the things I don't miss about being a Windows user is using notepad.exe and then copying pasting into a Linux putty session. You had nothing but /ns.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions or comments? And is there anything that in the cloud native ecosystem that anyone's like really excited about that's coming out? Anything that's pretty cool?
I'm not a big follower of what's happening, so my silence means nothing. I'm sure there's stuff happening.
Well, it can't be everything every week, right? Yeah, there's something, I remember someone mentions it, and I can't remember. There's like a tool, there's like a network visualization tool that I was like looking at, and I thought that was kind of neat, and I need to go back and find it. I can't think of anything. All right. I think that just about does it for today's episode. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This has been awesome. Like, thanks again for the great demo, Carlisia. You did an awesome job.
Thank you. You've been kind. You're so kind.
You did a great job. No doubt about it.
Thank you.
Valero is a cool tool. If you want to check it out, I'm sure you already know about it, but hey. Congratulations again on 1.0. That's awesome. Great to see like the first stable release. That's yes.
And we want inputs from everyone who wants to use Valero or are using Valero as far as what they want to see in the versions 1.1 and forwards.
Awesome. Cool.
Show up for our community meetings.
When are the community meetings, now that you mention it?
So every second Tuesday and last Tuesday of the month. And it's in the website. Okay.
Cool. You see it. Check this out. I'm sure there's a lot of good information that comes out then.
Not second Tuesday and last Tuesday. Sorry. Yeah.
Second Tuesday and last Tuesday.
Yes.
Okay.
It's every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks. Yeah. I was trying to do that math in my head. At first I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So every second,
let me just be more precise because the months don't work like that. It's every second Tuesday and the Tuesday 2 weeks from that Tuesday.
Yep. So every fortnight. Yeah.
There we go.
There you go. I've started saying that, by the way. Like, this show isn't a weekly show, it's a fortnightly show. Because I got tired of saying like, bi-weekly. What does that mean? Does it mean twice a week, or does it mean every other week?
Yeah, English is confusing that way.
English is confusing. It's a terrible language.
It is not terrible. So in that way of like saying bi-weekly, every 2 weeks is confusing.
It's just three languages slammed together that are trying to make sense of each other.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? All right. Thank you for joining us on this.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.